lots going on here. We had the raise from the low jack, and then a flat, and then a squeeze from the small blind, and now this flat has decided to back raise it. I mean, they could flat with some aces. That wouldn't be ridiculous. We did see them put in a lot of money on the turn, and then some pretty much dead money on the river earlier, so I don't give them too much credit. Open limps the low jack here, and I think that they're probably a fairly wild player. We'll wait till we see a few more hands shown down or get a little bit more stats, but I'm relatively confident that I'm happy to have them at my table. I'm not particularly happy to have deuces with a 3 and a 9 in my hand, so of course I'm going to fold that. We get a couple open limpers, 4-way flop, ace queen 10. Obviously Jack 10 is the nuts, so there's a straight possible already. Sets are possible, but not super likely, as no one raised pre-flop. Particularly top set is unlikely. And then middle set's not super likely. Bottom set's gonna probably see the most occurrences here. Top two, very possible. It's also easy for somebody to have like 2 pair and a straight draw, or even 3 pair and a gut shot, or like blocking. Then again, 3 pair and a gut shot is a pretty strong hand pre-flop. It would be 4 Broadway cards, which would often raise pre. There was a raise, and then kind of the tighter player from, well, not tighter player, but the player that we haven't seen really get out of line, raised on the flop, and then gets let into on the turn. So I think it's fairly likely that they may have had that King Jack, right, and been very happy with the flop and disgusted with the turn. King Queen 9-7. I think this is a fold against a low jack limper, even though it feels like they're probably someone to play a bunch of hands against. Open limps low jack. I don't think I'm going to be getting a lot of heads up pots, and I think this is a hand that plays much better in position in heads up pots. And while it's probably going to be heads up, it's heads up now. While I would definitely be in position, I think there's a fair chance that I would not have it be heads up, because I've got 2 super loose players. So I think we'd probably get a 3-way flop, and this hand I think it's one of the ones that will play a lot better heads up, just because it's going to make some non-nutty stuff that's pretty good, like a king high flush, like some of the straight combos. So given that, I'm comfortable just folding it. I'll mark it. I kind of want to know, like, I believe that's a button open, but there's a chance that it might be a cutoff open, is it? It's fairly likely that it's a cutoff open, in which case raising it there is quite reasonable. But again, I didn't really like how it was going to play multi-way, and I feel there's a very high chance of that pot going multi-way. It looks like we must have had a 3-bet pre-flop, and a bet on the flop, and everybody folds, or everybody but the better. Sixes, it's nice to have sixes. It would be nice to have suits and deuces and trays, even though they connect to the 6. Very bad cards. We don't want to play a whole lot of hands with those in them. Player on our left looks reasonable so far. They've raised a couple hands now. Haven't really gotten lost in too much. Haven't seemed to get mixed up in some of these weird spots. Aces are going to be doing all right here. Their range overall is gonna hit the queen, is gonna have some diamonds. Probably not gonna have a whole lot of straight draws. A hand like ace 3-5 or ace king 3-4, stuff like that rather. Certainly possible, but the deuce is very much a brick for them, I think. Whereas the button is a player that I think is gonna call with more deuce X in their hand than you should. Jack 9 is suddenly the nuts, but it doesn't seem super likely that either player has it. It's of course possible. I think the out of position player often has an overpair, a queen, and I think they're going to fold here a lot unless they did backdoor the nuts and for whatever reason go ahead and check it. Not really surprised to see that outcome. The button there has been very aggressive, and this is not a good hand, so I will fold it. Having 4 of a suit is clearly a lot worse than having 2 of a suit, and having the ace high with 4 of the suit is extra bad, because not only am I blocking my chance of making flushes, I'm also blocking other people's chances. Like if I have ace 4 of diamonds, someone else could have the 7 of diamonds, except now they can't because I have both of those cards in my hand. So those are the hands that I want to extract value from. Or they can't have king 9 of diamonds, or king 7 of diamonds, or queen 9, etc., etc., etc. All right, nut changing turn. I think we should categorize turns as nut changing and non-nut changing. Basically, that's sort of a thing I'm gonna keep in my head and try to always kind of just always observe. Like, did the nuts change? Right, and they did, and then they did again. They went from king jack to ace jack, although king jack would have still been the second nuts, but it would have chopped with a lot of other non-nut straights. Right, I guess a jack and any other card in that straight. King 7 3 deuce. This hand is garbage. 7 3 deuce. Not a lot of hands with 7 3 deuce in them that we're gonna play, but when suited to the king, I think having those extra spades can have a little ancillary. There's like a little sort of refund on the value we lose by not making our flush as much. In that, if somebody else happens to have the ace of spades, it's a little harder for them to have a second spade, because now we have 4 of them instead of 2 of them. So I think that's something to be aware of. Just that, like, 4 to a suit with an ace is like super bad, because now we're blocking hands that we want them to have, and 4 to a suit without an ace, still bad in terms of making our hand, but once we make our hand, we actually like having those blockers. If we're, trying not to lose to the ace high flush. Of course, king high flush, maybe we can get some value from like 7 3 of spades if we have king 2 of spades. But oftentimes, we're kind of just hoping that those smaller flushes are good, not doing a ton of value bets with them. All right, this hand I kind of lost the thread. What was it? Ace 4 ends up turning the wheel. Had the nut flush draw, I believe, as well. Oh yeah, a fair amount of money did go in there. That makes sense. The other player just had top pair. I have garbage again, and I will go ahead and mark this person as a friend of the game. And then this person, wait, was it? Oh, they just laughed. Sadness. So that's one of the other reasons I take notes is, I did notice the yellow, the N there, but if I had just missed that, if right now I was looking and I hadn't made a note earlier, I might think that these stats belong to this player. And then, the next hand, if they have $1 in the middle and I wasn't looking, I'd be like, oh, this loose player open limped. Of course, they're not posting because, they shouldn't, but some people do. Sometimes deliberately, sometimes not deliberately. As always, if there are any hands that I play that you would like to see further discussion of, in Twitch, just go ahead and type in the numbers or letters of my hole cards, and on YouTube, just go ahead and give a timestamp, rough timestamp, and if you give the hole cards as well, that's helpful, but probably also useful, because then I won't, like, if it's at the end of one hand and you get the timestamp a little wrong or something, then I won't end up, commenting on the wrong hand. Although often it's clear, because it's like, oh, there's a hand that might merit some discussion, and then there's like, I folded 3 10s with a 4. Not a whole lot here so far. I want to take a look at that hand. Let's see. So this wasn't the hand then? No, it would have been the one before it. This one? No, the one before it. Okay. Let's see. Let's first fold this hand. It is quite tragic. The 4 is just a very bad card. Make the 4 like maybe a 7, certainly a 9 or a 10, and I'm going to play the hand. I think this hand was interesting, so we might be able to get some reads. There's a raise, call. And we know that this player had like ace 4 something and some clubs, and they bet and they got called, and then they checked the turn. There's a big bet, and they called with the wheel, and the other player was just bluffing. They had called the flop with a jack, which was not good. The other player did have top pair, nut flush draw, and they ended up backdooring a straight. Would have been hard to call that bet, though, without the 4. The jack 10 10 8 might have won. So they, you know, they might have gotten an overpair or like a jack to fold. Maybe even gotten two pair to fold with that bluff. I don't know. So I'm not as sure about the flop play, whether that one pair with a pair below it, so it's harder to make two pair. It's very hard to make two pair. They could only have hit the, I think the 8 was their other card. The 10 would have given them trip 10s. All right. I'm going to show marked hands only. Okay, we'll fold this. Not a ton of spots for me so far in these first 10 or so hands, 11 hands, which is one of the things I like about, it's an upside and downside of single tabling. Single tabling, I can follow the action here. There was a raise in the low jack, the button called, which they often do. We can look and see, okay, so far this small blind character has been fairly loose. The big blind has been very tight. Not as tight as I have been, I guess. I haven't played a hand yet. The one hand I marked was a hand I folded, and maybe I could have played that hand. We'll find out later. Not a big deal. And 8-5-5, okay-ish for a raiser, but with very loose callers. I think there's going to be a fair amount of 5x, a lot more than there might be against tighter opponents. Low stack to pot ratio at this point, so it might feel like, with like aces up, maybe getting the chips in might feel okay. If they have like aces up with spades, of course they could have just turned jacks full. They could have flopped 8s full. This is not technically a nut changing card. Quad 5s are still the nuts. However, they're very unlikely. So, you know, the jack is an overcard to the 8. So it's a second nut changing card. It changes, you know, and then the king again, right? Another overpair got there. This person jams. I feel like they're supposed to have a boat here for sure. I'm not sure what else they would be jamming with, but I'm not that confident that they do. The other player, I feel probably did have aces, or maybe they had a 5 that then whiffed on its side cards. Unclear. A hand like Jack-Jack or 8-8, if they already were full, I think folding for that bet size on that river doesn't make a ton of sense. Just as, you know, the pot odds were just too great. Great pot odds. Great pot odds. Batman? I don't know. All right. Small blind, cut off open raise, which might have a similar range to a small blind, as I think the small blind in PLO doesn't open super wide relative to the button. I think the button opens a lot more, which to me suggests maybe position is more important in Omaha than in Hold'em. I'm kind of unclear on it. I think the pot limit nature actually increases positional importance, because out of position in a no limit game, you always have the option to bet all the chips. Whereas when you're out of position in a pot limit game, the betting is more constrained. And so you really need the opponent to do something, depending on what the SPR is. I guess if it's 13 or lower, then you can just go pot, pot, pot. But a lot of times out of position, you're not going to want to lead out, especially if you called pre-flop. You're not going to have much of a leading range, and thus it can be very hard to get all the chips in. Whereas in Hold'em, you could just be like 1.5 pot jam, and it's like, okay, all the chips are in. What do you think of my positional disadvantage now? 7-3-3 deuce, very bad hand. Do not let the suit make it feel pretty. I mean, whatever, it can feel pretty, it doesn't matter, but don't let it lead you to get involved, I would say. Raising a couple of callers. So this player on our left, who has so far still seemed fairly solid, has now seemed a little bit more aggro, a little looser, but this player playing, 27%, now closer to probably 30%, like 5 out of 16 probably. They are going to, I'm like trying to do the math in my head, but now I'm trying not to, because I don't want to. But they are going to They might have like the same range as this player over here who's 7-0, right? Because of these sample sizes. What we know though is that neither of those players are likely to usually play 80% of their hands. It's just very hard to have an 80 VPIP and end up with a 27. A 27 could really be a 17, and a 7 over there could be a 17. So, you know, one could be running very good pre-flop, and the other could be running very bad pre-flop. And similarly, I do not have a 0 pre-flop, VPIP. I do not have a 0 PFR. But so far, I have a 0 PFR. So I look like inordinately tight, right? And I have been trying to play a little tighter than in the past. And so far, I like that, you know, entering the pots a little stronger than I had been, not getting mixed up with hands that, heads up if it folds to me on the button, or we're going blind versus blind, or there's some kind of scenario where I might get a heads up pot. I'm comfortable playing, you know, some lighter opens, a little bit lighter 3-bets. But in these huge multi-way pots, like, you got to come with the goods. You know, you've got to make nuts. You've got to block nuts. You can't just go around just having whatever. Here, king, queen, 6 of diamonds. This is sort of an example of what I was talking about earlier. The queen would be bad because it would be blocking the second nut flush, but it would make it less likely for someone to have the ace of diamonds. So if I have like king, queen of diamonds, I'm kind of happy to have the 6 of diamonds because I'm less likely to lose to the nuts. I'm not likely to get that much value anyway. Whereas if I started with king, 6 of diamonds, and then you said, do you want the queen of diamonds? I'd be like, no, I'm good. Like, I want someone to have that card. And then another diamond. All right, double suited queens. Almost definitely going to play this hand. If there's a raise to me, I think I'll probably flat because the 4 is just like, eh. But being double suited is quite nice. And if it folds to me, I will certainly raise. If the cutoff were the raiser, I might 3-bet them. So this is a hand I'm going to mark for pre-flop because I already thought all these things. If there's no raise, yeah, I will go ahead and put one in myself. I will mark this player as having open limp to the low jack, and I will mark this hand as I am curious, not really about whether I should play it in this spot. I'm quite confident I should play it in this spot, but sort of whether all those other things were true, mostly in terms of 3-betting, which I hope I remember that's what I was thinking about. All right, ace, jack, jack, 2 hearts. I have hearts, that's nice. I have backdoor clubs, that's nice. The board's already paired, not so nice. A jack beats me, an ace beats me, and I'm not blocking any of that stuff. So I'm going to check, kind of hope to spike a queen, spike a 4 instead. Not a very helpful card, but it's bricky, and it's not going to really make my opponents beat me if they're not already beating me. For a half pot bet, I'm not going to draw to a queen high flush with a, 2 outer to a boat. I think that would be a little too optimistic. And, this is a card where if the board wasn't paired, I could consider some bluffs as I'm double blocking the nut straight, king, queen. But people can already have boats. So generally, I think trying to represent straights when people can already have boats is like maybe a misguided, approach. Like, what would I be trying to get them to fold? Like, I guess a jack, right? Which, getting someone to fold a jack could be a worthwhile endeavor. And in fact, nobody even had a jack. There was an ace, a fairly poor ace. Kings with a 7 and a 4 rainbow. 7 and a 4 are quite bad. I'm going to go ahead and fold and mark this one. I think it's probably close. The 7 and the 4 do connect. It's not as bad as having like an 8 and a 3 for sure, but in order to raise this hand, I think I have to be raising like more than 80% of my rainbow kings, and I'm just not confident that's the case here. On the button, I would have opened this hand, and in the hijack or low jack, I'd be pretty confident that this is a fold. However, in the cutoff, I'm not so sure. If we want to play like what would I have done with this hand here against this player, I probably would just get it in with top set. But with the player behind me, it would be very delicate, as ace queen and queen 9 are both completely possible. So the one player used their blocker, but they didn't really have any fold equity. So I guess they kind of just got it in because they had the straight draw and they felt like their odds were close enough and they were blocking. Ace jack 5-5. single suited. If I'm suited to the ace, I think I would open raise this at the moment, and suited to the jack though, I think it's substandard. I will mark this again for pre-flop, and I will verify. Oh no, I can just look over there. Yeah. Oh, did I mark the wrong hand? No. That's right, right? Yeah. Okay, cool. I just want to make sure that I'm marking the hands that I want to mark so that at the end of the session we'll be able to go through all of them. All right, so there was a pre-flop raise here. I missed who it was, but judging by the size of the pot, I believe it was the button. So we have top two pair against top and bottom pair. Who turns a straight draw and doesn't get there. They both turned a straight draw, actually. All right, 10-10-5-5, nickel and dimes. Double suited. This is like the Woolworth special, the holiday Woolworth special. You know, two pairs, double suited. We're gonna raise most of those, certainly from the hijack. So I like this hand a lot before the flop. I like it not so much on the flop. Jack 4 deuce is one that, you know, I can see bet some. These players have been not super foldy so far, and thus I'm not super optimistic that I'm going to get folds. Now I am blocking the wheel. I'm not blocking the ace. I should have, you know, ace in my range, although when I check they might not really believe that. Again, they're not super foldy, but I think because I'm blocking the nuts, and if I'm trying to get them to fold an ace, I think I have to like actually put a real bet in here. I can't go small. They certainly can have an ace, right? But I think if I pot it, like ace whatever is going to be like, oh, you know. And that hand was largely because of the blockers. I'm going to hit review, and we'll look at pre-flop, but it's not primarily a pre-flop spot. I'm pretty confident. I guess what we will see is like, do I raise all 10-10 XX, you know, all 10-10 double suited with a pair? Just like a checkup on that, and then discuss my sort of, you know, blocker bluff plus repping, you know, my own range. All right, we have a raise and a couple of calls. And this flop, I mean, would have been great for my hand, although it's one of those spots where, you know, I would flop the nuts and just hope it holds, because there's tons of bad cards. A spade, a 6, an 8, a 10, a jack. All those cards would de-nut my 2, 4, 6, 8. What boards do we appreciate? 7, 5, 9, 3, 5, 7, ace 3, 5. Or things that give us like the nut house, like 4, 4 deuce. Again, like the 9, not a good card, right? It 5, 6, 7, and 9 are not very good cards for the hand that I was dealt. You know, this is a nut changer. And another, not a nut changer, right? But if you have a straight, all of a sudden it's like, oh, what do I beat now? You know, you beat a 9 with a straight draw, basically. And we have a pot-sized bet here. You know, they didn't bet the turn, so it's like, what, did you make a flush and now you're betting pot? Did you turn quads and then just get shy because you want someone to make something? I don't know. Their river bet of pot is a little odd, I find, when the board really doesn't change. So we lost the player who was the most interesting player at the table to play against. Got a new player who's a shorty, right? 30 blinds. I believe that is the minimum. So sometimes that can mean somebody who's short stacking and basically just trying to get it in with like aces. A lot of times it just means someone who wants to just gamble, right? Just buy in for the minimum, gamble, 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 go, go, go. And that's fine. It would be more fine if the rake weren't tragic. This is funny. We had a player with like 100 VPIP, and then they busted and left, and then a new player sat down and they have 100 VPIP. So, cheers. Maybe it's the same person. They left and came back. Not a terrible strategy, you know, ending your session and then coming back. If you're not going to be collecting actionable data on your opponents because, like, you're not running a HUD or you just don't care, you know, denying your opponents the access to actionable data seems wise. If it folds to me, I will open this hand. 6-6 with a 5 and a 4, and a suit to the 6, I think is fairly decent. This is the one, this is where now I'm like, two limpers, one of whom is in very tight, and if I were to raise here, I would want my low jack range, which I don't have. I am going to overlimp this, though, because I think this hand plays fairly decently multi-way, and the blinds haven't been super aggressive. Of course, on a board like this, there's nothing easier in the world than just folding a hand like this. Unless the board runs out consecutive 6s or a 2 and a 3, I can't really make the nuts. Even a 7 and then a straight 9-10 would already be. So one reason that this hand I think does play well in a spot like this is, first of all, my cards are going to be more live, I think, because people are generally going to play the bigger cards. If the board does come low, my hand might be a little sneaky. You know, maybe they see somebody who so far has been fairly tight and they're not really expecting the Inquisition. Wait, no, not the Inquisition. Okay, so they had a set of jacks and an ace. And here, okay, I think with the suited ace, I can raise this. Everything sort of connects to the next card. Ace jack, jack 8, 8 4, 4 ace. So I've got like connectivity, barely. And most importantly, though, I have the nut suit. And the big blind is a player I really want to play hands with. So it looks like we lost the small... Oh, no, that was a new player. That's right. So I already commented on that. And I had already forgotten. Okay, so now getting 3-bet by a player who has been fairly passive. Not super passive, but more loose, kind of loosey-goosey. This is not a hand I'm going to want to call a 3-bet with. I will mark it just for, you know, due diligence and all. But, you know, double suited, I think, would be a different scenario. But this is towards the bottom of my cutoff range, I feel. It's, you know, it's not a hand that I was like, ooh, I got this hand in the cutoff. I was like, yeah, okay, I think I can open this. And, you know, aces and 8s, I feel like they're probably pretty good here. I would bet this for value after this action. Kings, yeah, so, you know, my hand does okay against that. Let's see what the other player flatted with and then folded. This is suited trash, in my humblest of opinions. Double suited 10s on the button. Okay, so there was king, there was 10-10. The kings had a 10, so bad news for the 10s. And, you know, on the river there, I just felt like... So first of all, I had a 4. I had folded a 4. So I would have been blocking the wheel. I think the wheel came in. And is that true? I think that's true. Let's see. Yeah, the wheel came in on the turn. So the 4 would have been a nice card just to be like, yeah, it's a little more or less likely that somebody has the nut straight. And it just felt like aces and 8s were like almost definitely good at that point. Not that much to get value from maybe, but somebody maybe has like an ace king and then, you know, whiff. With that low of an SPR, I think anything better than ace 8, unless they had specifically like pocket 8s that were like, you know, suited with some other pocket pair maybe, which is hard for them to have because I have an 8. There's only 2 8s left in the deck. So a combination of blockers and just the way the hand played out. You know, I think finding spots to value bet 2 pair is not the easiest skill. Okay, so straight over straight. All right, so now we know this player, you know, no point in taking a note. All right, another nice little festive holiday-looking hand here. The red and green. What else is red and green? I'm sure there's some other references we can make. It is interesting that when you choose the 4-color deck, 2 of the colors are red and green. Just like the chips at a lot of casinos are, you'll have red chips and green chips as 2 of the main denominations. But I think about 5% of the population is red-green colorblind. Check. Okay, paired board. Second nut flush draw. No overcards to the board either. I think I'm just going to check fold. Even with the 2 back, you know, the backdoor flush draw. I don't know. This might be too nitty. With the caller, I'm feeling a lot better about playing it a little more on the passive side, and more on the, you know, folding, getting out of dodge side. I'm not sure how much more I'm supposed to hit the king than my opponents. I would love to run some Monker sims on PLO. I've thought about getting Simple Omaha, their Omaha solver, but I only have 16 gigs of RAM on my computer. So at some point, maybe I'll have like a donation link, and then people can help me get get more RAM for my computer, or get a new computer. It's a pretty decent computer in terms of speed, but 16 gigs just won't cut it for running Omaha sims, right? I can run some Hold'em sims of usefulness, but it's just not good enough. All right, fives with a suit, 4-3. I think against a raise and a call, I think I fold. Against this raiser, I'm kind of tempted, and on the fence, again, we'll tag one more hand. What have we got? We've got 6, 7 hands now. Maybe we'll get to about, I don't know, a little bit more. Oh, hello, Smitty PLO. Thank you for the follow. Getting closer to that magical 50 number, wherein I can make ones of dollars streaming, which will be very fun. And that'll help me get a PLO solver soon, maybe. I mean, or I could just spend a couple buy-ins and buy the RAM. And maybe I'll do that. I'm not sure whether Smitty streams PLO, but I will check that out after the stream. And if so, I will give a follow. And if you enjoy PLO and they do stream PLO, I suggest you do the same. All right, King Jack 10-5. Although having not actually seen anyone's channel, I'm not giving a full recommendation, but a sort of a statement of curiosity and appreciation for the follow. All right, King Jack 10-5. Not great, I think this is a spot where I used to play way too many hands, over limping the small blind, and I still might play too many hands, and I definitely still lack a clear, oh, this is what I should play, this is what I should do in the small blind, right? And that's something to work on, that's something to look for. Again, if you're watching on Twitch, if there's a hand that you want further discussion of, just type the whole cards in the chat, and I will mark the hand and review it after the session. And if there is if you're on YouTube, then just go ahead and give the time link along with ideally the whole cards as well. All right, let's see. Not a lot going on here. I mean, a very nut-changing river card, right? It goes from 8-9 to now there's 2 better straights as well as spades. So we'll see what happens. I haven't found a lot of people streaming PLO, so I would like to watch more of it as, I've been using PLO Launchpad and PLO Matrix, and those have both been very helpful, but I think sometimes just getting hours and hours of watching good players play and talk through their thought process can be very, very helpful and kind of help us build an intuitive feeling for how to approach the game, or some ways that the game can be approached. I don't know if I would describe myself as a good PLO player at this point, but I think at least reasonable, hopefully, and I'd say better than the field, because these games are good. Queen 6 deuce deuce, very bad hand, very, very bad. Let's see, what are we coming up on? 40 minutes? Yeah, maybe about. Do we want to finish this orbit or do one more? We'll see. We'll see how long this orbit goes. So we have a raise out of the big blind after a few limps. And, in terms of whose range this hits, I don't know. It's not like especially super extra good for the raiser's range, but they certainly can hit, they can have those top sets. They can have, aces or kings with diamonds, a lot of wraps as well as pairs. The limper can have, 4 cards. They probably have 4 cards that they were dealt. That's about the information we know when somebody has 100 VPIP, that they were dealt 4 cards, because then the hand proceeded. There is a raise of half pot now. A bet. The board pairs, so this changes the nuts. The diamonds come as well. So queen was the nuts on the flop. It's close to the nuts on the turn. You can probably play it like it's the nuts. when there's a bet and a raise, what's this? I have some notes on this person, right? Oh no, that was a different person. But it might be the same person. We've decided it might be the same person. I wouldn't be shocked if they, like, what did the out of position player have? Like, what did they want to call a raise with there on the flop and then fold that river? That's very curious. That was a very odd hand, I think, by both parties. Checking back the flop and then wanting to raise that turn, and then calling that turn out of position, and then folding that river for that much, right? It wasn't like it was a full pot size bet. It was substantially smaller, I believe. Wasn't it like 30 something? And there was there's 100 in the middle, and they bet like 30. I don't know. I don't know. So yeah, this is a fairly good board for a pre-flop raiser. Sure, 5-3 is possible. Yes, the 100 VPIP player can have all the combos of 5-3, except the ones with the 3 of clubs, because we folded it. But I think, playing ace-ace as if it were the nuts makes some sense, particularly if it's like ace-ace 5x, particularly if you have diamonds to go with it, as then you'll just have a ton of, redraw outs. I don't think king-8, even with a suited 5-4, is, it's like two hands that I would raise on the button or maybe cut off in hold'em, so that don't really help each other very much. I mean, the 8 and the 5-4 connect, but not in a delightful way. Limped pot, this would be one of those kind of somewhat difficult flops to navigate, where I'd have a good deal of equity, but I wouldn't have a lot of situations where I could put money in on future streets with a lot of confidence. Having said that, the ace of hearts and the non-heart sixes all would have given me the nuts. A lot of people seem to be interested in this hand, so that's interesting. The small blind leads out for pot, and then we get a raise that's a little less than pot by the player on my right, and then a cold call of that. The cold call suggests maybe something like a heart draw, maybe with a little bit of straight outs. If they have too much more than that, I feel like they might want to go ahead and 4-bet themselves. All right, 3-5 just became the nuts, so a set of sevens went substantially down in value. Ace-ace, quite unlikely, given the lack of a pre-flop raise. So this player had raised the flop, and then they keep betting, so they could have a set. Okay, the button's basically saying, like, yeah, I had 5-3. Maybe they had, like, 3-4-5-6, something like that, and they had the wrap. And also possible that they have a hand like ace-deuce of hearts or ace-x of hearts, and maybe, ace-5-6 with nut hearts, and maybe another pair. And they're just like, let's just get it in. But, yeah, I mean, we don't have really a strong read on those players thus far. A lot of thought being given. We'll play one more orbit after this. Let's see what's going on. Okay, so they did, yeah. So they flopped the wrap with a straight flush draw. So that's pretty nice. And the other player just had the nut flush draw, turned a pair of aces. Well, did they have a second pair? Yeah, they turned aces up to go with the nut flush draw. And given that two players wanted to put in 2 bets on the flop, I think 5-3 was a lot more likely than it otherwise might be. Sometimes you might think, oh, well, 5-3 is not that likely. But given how much money people wanted to put in on the flop, that there were 2 opponents who wanted to put in 2 bets, I think aces and deuces were very unlikely to be good. Top pair, the under gutter, right? The butt shot, as I call it sometimes, the gut shot to the underside, and then the, I guess a spade blocker. Not anything to get excited about. Not going to put any money in. I will hit sit out next blind for whenever that comes around. Play a few more hands. Full pot bet. I missed the turn action, so it's hard to really... Oh, this time they made the straight flush. Last time they didn't even need it. All right, so straight flushes abound. I mean, if you watch this stream day after day, where I'm just playing one table, there have been a number of straight flushes and a number of straight flush draws. And you know, you can see how much more common they are in Omaha than in Hold'em. Like it's a hand to think about. Oh, does my opponent have the straight flush here when you have the nut flush? I think in like solver land, you're probably usually gonna get it in with the nut flush. Probably. I'm not sure. That's something that I want to explore. But I think in human land, where people aren't doing as many things, um, you know, there's some spots where we can get away from the nut flush when our opponent can have the straight flush. Of course, the bluffs there would be the blocker to the straight flush, and maybe in those spots the nut flush is played passively. I don't know. That's so the long story short is I need to upgrade my computer so I have enough RAM to run Omaha Sims, because I think that's going to be fascinating to look at the output there. All right, so top two pair against top and bottom pair on the flop, or top two pair on the flop versus top two pair on the turn. The turn was better, so. Okay, I think I opened this from the cutoff. There go. I will also, like, this player limps every hand unless they want to raise it. So I think I can play closer to my button range, right? I shouldn't be thinking, oh, I need a significantly stronger hand, then I'll raise on the button, then I'll open on the button. Then I'll raise first in on the button. I did raise the button. I raised second in, right? The first in was a limper. So until I'm kind of shown otherwise, I think I can loosen up here a little bit in terms of getting closer to just my regular button range. Okay, this is a board that should be good for me. And I have clubs. I'm not blocking any of the pairs. I don't have any of the pairs on board. I'm going to take a free card. I think there's some very good free cards. That's not a very good free card. It's a passable free card. I think there was maybe some merit to betting the flop, but I don't think I bet a ton there, three ways in position. Okay, so it turns out that the turn was a pretty good card, if I knew what the river was. But, and, you know, had I bet the flop and not gotten check raised, maybe I check back the turn, maybe I end up making the nuts, maybe I end up realizing my equity more than I did. Did they call with a pair of jacks? They had a pair of jacks. Let's look at these. So there was a bigger flush draw than mine. They're going to call the flop, and I mean, I would have ended up beating them probably unless they did some kind of something else. The other player had a wrap on the turn and made one pair. Was there a river bet? I feel like there was a river bet. What was the bet on the river? Turn river. Yeah, this one person bet like $20 and got called by a jack. That's what happened, right? Wow. Okay. Okay. Let's just say don't no, we'll say calls with Jack X, calls big river bet with Jack X on, what was it, ace 9, like 3, no, not 3, 4, Jack, 4, 10, 8, it was an 8, Jack, so I had queen 10. X-clam. So, I feel better about not trying to bluff this person. I have to say. Of course, on the flop, it would have worked, right? And maybe I would have gotten check raised by this the opponent across from me, the 100 V-pipper. It's hard to leave a game like this, I have to say. It doesn't feel the best. But the games are often close to this good, so not trying to do an ad for a poker site or anything. But the games are good. More is just an ad for the game of Pot Limit Omaha. I think even places where a lot of the other games aren't good, the PLO games are often some of the better ones. I mean, because equities run closer than they do in Hold'em, I think there can be a misconception that just like, oh, pre-flop doesn't matter that much. You know, the equities run so close that like we can just gamble, and like, yeah, we can just gamble, but like I get to be the house if I choose to play slightly better hands than my opponents do. Obviously, it's more complicated than that. But like when somebody just wants to gamble and they walk into a poker room, a lot of those people are going to want to play PLO, except for the ones who are like, but I want to go all in. And then it's like, okay, PLO is maybe not their game. This is not a very good hand, not suited to the ace. We want it to be suited to the ace. And I've got not, let's do one more round, as I don't have a ton of hands. I have 7 hands, but like 6 of them are just pre-flop spots. So I think the session review is going to be a little shorter than it has been on some days. Not as short as yesterday, where the power went out and I got disconnected and didn't get to do the session review as part of the stream. I did record it later, and it will go up on YouTube. But which is ZenMadman Poker, which I'm still playing around with it. You know, it's it's still under construction, but there's videos there from the first number of days of the stream. Actually, all the videos that by now have been disappeared from the back catalog on Twitch are on YouTube. So that's the idea. It's kind of build a catalog of videos of the process of learning the game, right? The idea behind these streams isn't like, this is how you're supposed to play Pot Limit Omaha. Like, I don't know. I can't say that with that level of confidence. I mean, there's an extent to which I feel like very few people can, and a lot of people often give advice that's a little too confident. I think that's very common in the poker world. It's common elsewhere, but there's this kind of bravado. Oh, this is definitely the way to do this. Oh, that's terrible. It's like, there's a lot of spots where we don't know, right? And not just the individual doesn't know, but like, you know, poker's a game about uncertainty. It's about, you know, now we have solvers that can tell us, oh, this is definitely correct or definitely incorrect in a game theory balance standpoint, but our opponents are humans, they're making mistakes. Nothing can tell us whether something is correct or isn't correct against our opponent's actual ranges. I'm going to raise, make it 550 or 6 here. And, you know, I think it's important when putting this range, you know, this raise in to be like, yeah, I have the best hand, almost definitely. I only need 20% equity. I think I have well above that. I probably got in the 30 whatever percent range. But that means I'm going to lose the hand probably like 70% of the time. On a board like that, if I had the ace of clubs, I'd feel very good about this board. As it turns out, I basically have a gutter. And I'm gonna check. There is a low stack to pot ratio, you know, on the one hand, it's like $23, $24 so this person, I really do want to think about how I want to play against this person. Like, they've been very aggro with some very suspect hands, right? So, like, I might just want to put it in against them. If the other player came in, I would definitely not. And then this player hasn't really said anything about having anything good. So because of the stack to pot ratio and because of exactly who my opponent is, and I'm not going to have to play turn or river or whatever, I'm just going to get to see my equity, I think that this makes sense. But again, like, we have to feel comfortable with, like, this is gamble, but I think I'm going to have an equity edge here. I could be super wrong, and that could have been a terrible play. I don't know. And a solver can't exactly tell me, all right, well, whatever I do pre-flop here, I think a solver can tell me is correct. But the last hand, which, you know, I think is also important to recognize and state and acknowledge that, like, I did have some anxiety, which is still with me a little bit, just in terms of these spots where there's an opportunity to do something that's, like, extremely wrong, possibly, and also an opportunity to do something that just, like, doesn't go well, just like we lose all our chips. And it's not so much the actual dollar figure, but it's the, like, compared to the rest of the session was like, I was basically folding most of the rest of the session. Here we're going to have a very low SPR. There's going to be like 70 in the middle with 115 behind. And I flop top set, which is fairly fantastic. So I want to take a breath. I want to think about what bet sizing do I want to use here? Do I want to check? I think there's going to be a lot of checking out of position in a lot of spots, but here the SPR is so low. I think something in the half pot vicinity and then jam turn is what makes the most sense to me. I could also just jam, you know, pot, basically. I think, like, if the turn, there are so many straight cards. Well, okay, we get it in. We have top set with a low SPR. It's hard for people to have way better equity than me or anything. I mean, they've got a big draw, and okay, so on the turn we got drawn out on, but on the river we drew out on them. I will mark that hand. That was very exciting. Oh, maybe it's how do I make a clip? Should I make a clip? I can make a clip. Yeah, we'll do that. And half the clip is going to be me being like, how do I make a clip? I'll fold this. All right, so back-to-back aces. That was fun. That went well. That was not a pre-flop decision. Yeah, so, let's pop up the it should say what our equity was, right? So we had 54% on the flop, 22 on the turn, but we ended up getting there. How much did the other person on our right have on the flop? So 18%, which is, fairly unfortunate for them. They might have thought that we were leading out with like aces, which, I mean, technically I had aces. That they weren't wrong about that. And that by jamming, they could get me to fold that equity. It's interesting that that player to that point had been playing not super tight, but, not super aggressive. And then all of a sudden they're just like, yeah, I've got a backdoor and a gutter, I think is what they had, right? And we'll take a look at the hand more after the session. I marked it for review. And welcome if you're just joining us. If there are any specific hands that I don't say that I mark and you want to, or whatever, if there's any hands that you want me to review, always let me know. I'll be happy to throw them into the session review. I guess playing that extra orbit worked out okay so far. Not to jinx anything. I do have a player behind me with $340, so they could take a bite out of my stack if we get the right or wrong matchup, or the right matchup and the wrong run out for me. Never want to count your chips until you're outside the casino, or another way of saying it, it's not your money until you step outside. All right, so yeah, I'm not really used to things going really well while I'm on stream. It's a unusual experience having the, yeah, so this is just going to be a clear fold, and we'll proceed to this post-session review. We've got double suited aces and queens. I will look in the matrix to see, no, this is quite clearly a very happy 3-bet, very happy to get it in if someone wants to 4-bet. I'm unblocking kings, which I guess isn't really going to 4-bet that much, so unblocking kings isn't that big a deal, but, my opponent's going to have kings sometimes. They can have aces. If they have aces with me, I'm thrilled to get it in with them. I think we can look later at, like, what my EV is versus like, random aces. I think I'm slightly curious about that. It's not that important though. I flop top set. Some things about this board. It's queen high, right? So as the pre-flop raiser, who the 3-better, I'm gonna have some queen, but not a ton. I think I'm gonna probably flat a lot of the queen combos that I continue with, and I'm gonna have a lot of aces. 3-betting in a scenario like this, right? I'm gonna have some connectors too, so I don't know whether I'm gonna 3-bet at all with like with what, like 5, 6, 7, 8 double suited. I can look into that more to try to get a better feel of what my range is supposed to be here. Oh, and thank you MJ Finn for the follow. Getting closer to the magic 50. The follow's appreciated. And so here, top set, obviously great. Hard for my opponents to have, when there's a flush draw and a straight draw and you have top set, somebody can have the straight and flush draw, or like a wrap with the flush draw, and they can actually have better than 50% equity. Having said that, even if somebody had like 60% equity and I had 40 at heads up, getting it in here, I think, still makes sense because there's so much money in the middle, right? I could do the actual math, but the point is their range isn't going to have like 60% equity. So I was really trying to figure out what size to bet. I think checking and giving a chance of this going through, and then maybe a king comes, maybe a three, 2, 3, 5, 7, or 8 comes. I think there's, because the SPR is so low, right? It's less than 2. I basically, the money in the middle is kind of worth more relative to the money in the stack than it is in a lot of other scenarios. So I just go ahead and I say, okay, let's half pot. Gives room for somebody to think maybe they have some fold equity. And I regretted it when then this player called, and I thought, I'm kind of letting them get there maybe too cheaply if they have a straight draw, whereas if I bet pot and they just have an open ender, they should fold. Maybe they won't, and that's fine, but then this though leaves me a very easy jam on the turn. The button decides to go ahead and jam right away. Of course, I'm not folding the nuts, and we get here, and this player do they have a real wrap? They do. Okay, 3, 5, 7. That's actually a really good hand on the flop. And especially since like other people aren't going to have the straight draw that often. Now it turned out that the button did have 2 backdoor flush draws plus a gut shot, and then if they hit their gut shot, they'd have redraws to the bigger straight. The redraws to the bigger straight, I think, are a lot less important in a scenario like this where we're all in on the flop. Whereas if I had bet and the pot was smaller and they just call, they can kind of float in position, and there's going to be a lot of really nice turn cards for them. If, say, they hit that 5 on the turn, now they have the nuts with a redraw to the nut, so they can get it in. And 2 of those 5s are also going to give them a flush draw. So I think their hand has like a lot of playability if there's going to be further betting, but there's not. So I'm very happy to have my hand, especially when the river pairs the board. And let's just take a look at the equity calculator for a moment. And we've got, let's see, we'll go to the flop because that's when the money went in. We'll just hit calculate and see that, I've got over 50% equity in a 3-way spot. So that's lovely. And we'll see what happens if I just remove one player's range. And now I've got 76% equity. And then we'll remove the other player's range. And now I've still got that 54% equity, right? So I think one of the interesting things here is that this player takes away my equity. And then the other player, anything that makes the other player doesn't really take away additional equity, right? I've got 54.27, and then if I add the other player's hand, I have 54.05. So mostly I'm losing equity to this one player who turned the straight, and then the other player is like siphoning off some of that equity. And I think trying to think about like where the equity goes when somebody has somebody has the best hand, and then somebody else has equity. When you add a third player to the pot, whose equity are they taking? And it turns out in this spot, they're not taking mine. They're taking the other player's equity. So I'm like, yeah, come into the pot, right? I don't want this to be heads up. I want this 3-way. If it's heads up and this other person folds, and we've just got, this, like, yeah, okay, cool. I'm pretty happy with that. But if this flop had come out and I was heads up against the button, which is like what maybe should have happened, right? Like 3, 5, 7, 8 monotone. Don't really want to be taking 2 to the face, a 3-bet, just like, oh yeah, okay, let's get, a quarter of our stack in. But, but ace 9, 8, 7 double suited, I'm pretty confident that is a hand you're supposed to raise and call a 3-bet on the button. So given that, I think this flop coming out and then me betting half pot, maybe, that would be a very reasonable situation, a very reasonable scenario. And they would have 24% equity against my actual hand, against like random aces. Not totally random, but why can't I make it a 2 of clubs? I don't understand. Okay. I guess I can't type a C. That's weird. So I think my equity is going to go way down. And let's see, they're going to have four. That's like 20%. They're going to have over 30%. An ace isn't good for them. So maybe they're not going to gain that much. But I think they'll have 30 something. Yeah, 37. Okay, so that's substantial, right? So the fact that I had, but even then, like they basically have to want me to fold aces. I think their play on the flop is interesting because they want me to fold aces, but they have an ace, so they're blocking aces. So maybe they want me to fold kings, which I could have. I don't know. Not going to be too judgmental here. I don't have any real notes to take about this hand in terms of things that I looked up and learned about it. There's those equity things, but I don't think that they're like necessarily conclusions that I'm going to really be able to like integrate into my understanding of the game in a way like further. I think it was useful to look those things up, but it's not like facts that I want to write down. Okay, so here we get this situation where before the flop, yeah, I'm gonna raise. I have aces and decent aces, right? I've got a connected 7-8 and 7-8 suited. So I flop a gut shot straight flush draw and the best one pair hand. I'm losing to, any two cards 9-4-5, right? Whether it's a set or two pair. But I've got equity against those hands. And depending on, like, if I put a bet out here and someone calls, I think I'm going to have a very uncomfortable turn situation. And it's not like that I want to avoid discomfort, but I want to avoid situations where I'm going to have a big pot out of position and just really have no idea what I'm doing and not really even know how to figure out what to do. So I decide to check and kind of see who does what. If everybody checks around, and it's hard to think of a brick that can come on the river, but if everybody checks around, I'll feel a lot better about my aces. That's not what happens. We have a check, then we have a pot size bet and a fold. And a pot size bet from a lot of opponents would be very scary. From this person, I think we'd observed some behavior. They're also playing all of their hands, which yes means all the 9-4, 9-5, 4-4, 5-5, 5-4. All these combinations are going to be in their range, but so are all of the wraps, all of the flush draws, the 9XXX, just a lot of stuff. And I've seen them be a little weird post flop, maybe is the way to put it. Not very specific there, but I decided to just put the money in. I feel like against this player, putting the money in is going to be a fairly reasonable thing to do, and they end up folding. There's also the other player left to act. They're a very loose, fairly passive player. I think if they flop two pair or better, they're usually betting here. And as we've seen in the hand that actually happened right after this hand, they can put it in pretty light pre-flop. But, as we saw, actually their hand wasn't bad on the flop. So I think I'm going to get them to fold a lot of equity. And here I get the other player to fold a lot of equity. I was just thinking, because there's 25 in the middle, we're not that deep. If I'm thinking that I have decent equity here, it's going to be hard for me to have really bad equity, right? Basically, if we launch the equity calculator here on the flop, let's give the opponent, I'll move this so we can see the whole flop. Let's give the opponent, like, what can we give them? 9, 10, 9, 10 or something. So they have top set and a better flush draw. Now my equity is going to be pretty bad. Yeah, now I've only got 18%. So that's terrible. But if I give them, like, just 9, 9, let's just give them 9, 9, Jack, Queen, just like random nines, right? Random top set. Now I have 40%, which again isn't enough. So, we're still working. We're still looking for some stuff. 9, let's say 9, 5, and then something like this, a straight draw. All right, now I'm actually a favorite, right? Even though they're ahead, I'm a favorite. So, to give them an actual range, I don't know. That might be a little tricky. In this, I'm not quite up to that yet. Something like this, I think I'm going to be no, I'm ahead. So they've got all those other outs. I'm blocking some. I think I'm a dog. No, I'm a favorite, actually. Interesting. They do have a pair. So they've got a lot of outs, but I'm blocking a lot of their outs, right? An ace actually isn't good. That's an important thing. If we change that to like a king, then I think they're going to be a favorite. I think that's what I was thinking. Nope, I'm still a favorite. So there are a lot of these hands. They can have like top pair. Even if they have a better flush draw than me, I'm ahead of them. And if they have a set or two pair plus a flush draw that's better than mine, then I'm in trouble. But otherwise, you know, the equity is reasonable. And it's not like I ever have zero equity. Yeah, I don't think I can have zero equity. Like ace ace 9 9 with clubs even, I still would have the 6 of clubs. So can't have zero equity. All right. Moving on. This is just now we're into the pre-flop checkup section of the review. So let me make sure that I've got my thing set up. Okay. The PLO matrix is what I'm using to look things up. It's a very useful tool on YouTube. Link in the video description below. It's from Upswing Poker. 5-5-4-3 against a raise and 2 calls. So big blind versus cutoff squeeze spot. I'll look that up first, as that is this scenario. And I went ahead and folded, and I think it's probably close, but no, it is close, but it's a call, right? So this hand actually does play fairly well here. Single suited is call. Oops. Is call with good suit. So basically suited to the 5, not if it's 4-3 suited. Small blind versus cutoff squeeze spot. That is incorrect. It is big blind. Big blind versus cutoff squeeze, which is what I'm looking up. I want to verify. Okay, so that's one bit of data. Is near bottom of range or at bottom of range. So basically, if you make any of those, you know, a 4 or a 3, a deuce, it's a fold. 7-3 is a fold. So hands around here are calls. But let's look back then at big blind versus cutoff. This might be one of those hands where we actually fold a hand. Yeah, okay. So what we're going to do is we're going to fold 5-5-4-3 single suited heads up versus cutoff RFI. So the reason that this hand should have been called instead of folding it as I did is because it can make some very strong hands and get paid by my various opponents. And it's going to drain equity from probably whatever the best hands are and not so much lose equity, right? Whereas like heads up, some hands when you're heads up, they're going to have better equity. Like they're going to have more than their fair share of equity, right? Like let's say we have a hand that's 50-50 against someone heads up, but then we introduce another player and now we have like 16%. Whereas this is going to have like, and that's a dramatic example, it's probably an exaggeration, but some hands are going to lose a lot of equity when a third player enters the pot. This is the hand where maybe heads up, we only have, you know, 30% equity, but then 4 ways, maybe we're going to have 25%, right? We're just going to lose a little bit of equity, not a ton of equity. So that's one of the reasons that I believe this hand would be called in this spot, but actually folded in the other spot. And I think I might have had that backwards during this session because often we are going to play a little tighter in these spots where there's a bunch of other players in. But it's not just about tighter, it's about kind of a different selection of hands. And this is one of the hands that would make that cut and not the other. All right, let's proceed. All right, ace, jack 8-4 with a suited ace, fold, fold, I raise. I believe this is a straightforward raise from the cutoff. I could be wrong. Ace, jack, single suited with an 8 and a 4 is fairly clear raise. So ace, jack, 8, for single suited is RFI from cutoff, call, you know what? I'm going to make a new abbreviation. I'm going to say GS for good suit. And I will elaborate that here. So that means the ace is suited. Okay. And then BS will be bad suit. Is RFI from cutoff, call, 3-bet, IP, fold, 3-bet, out of position. So, yeah, that's what that says. So here what I'm supposed to do is if the button 3-bets me, I'm supposed to fold. But this other person 3-bet me, and I'm supposed to call against their 3-bet. However, with the other player in the pot, I feel like this is the type of hand that then loses more equity in a squeeze spot. So how would I test that? I think there are some ways. There's no cutoff versus big blind, but I can look at the big blind squeeze versus cutoff, and I can see whether this hand is any different. Big blind versus cutoff, or big blind versus squeeze cutoff, or this hand's class, right? So I'm going to try that. This is an experiment. We're going to go, okay, versus cutoff. Big blind versus cutoff. We're going to look at ace jack single suited and just get a sense. This hand would be folded big blind versus cutoff in general. And similar hands like 8-5, 7-5, mostly you want a 10 or some fairly connected cards. Like 8-6 and 7-6 are folds, but 8-5 and 7-5 are 3-bets. Go figure. But now I'm going to go back and look big blind versus squeeze versus cutoff, and look at this hand class again, and it calls instead of 3-bets, which suggests to me, and it's this kind of similar range. This hand doesn't call, but hands in this region call. It looks like a little bit tighter range. It's kind of hard to tell. I'm not sure that I've really gained very valuable data from this, but I've gained some thoughts. It's gonna 3-bet a lot more this hand class heads up than 3-ways, which kind of suggests to me, one, maybe just you're gonna call certain hands anyway, but also that maybe this doesn't do as well in a 3-bet pot multi-way. So I went ahead and folded it. I did say, let's see, cutoff, just open raise, ace jack double suited. Let's take a look at this double suited. What am I going to do with 8-4? Yeah, it's actually raise re-raise if double suited. But hands near it are raise calls also. So I will write definitely continue if double suited. And what else do we have? There was something that I feel like I was learning. No, this is fine. This is fine. That's what we got. So that's the value we've extracted from this hand. Oh yeah, this was also, I was looking at this. You see, there's no flop action, right? Check check, turns check check, rivers check. I think ace-8. I think this is a great spot to value bet aces up. There's maybe not a lot to get value from, but I just feel like we're not beat very often at all, right? And aces up, like aces and 8s, with a 4 especially, it's like, okay, it's extra unlikely. Like, probably no one had the wheel anyway, because this is a wet board and low SPR. You probably just want to get it in. But, maybe the other player was like trying to trap, having that 4, or either player, right? That's the effective stack size. Either player, but is less likely to have a 4, 5, because we have a 4. So it's hard to make 4 or 5. And it just feels like nobody can beat aces and 8s, and that's the case, right? They have kings or queens, but not kings and queens. And we carry on. 10-10, 5-5, double suited, nickels and dimes, and I raise this in the hijack. I feel like that's probably a clear open raise. I mostly wanted to see whether hands of this sort are like always an open raise. Yeah. Any 10-10 pair, 10-10 RR, so double pair. DS. Double pair, double suited is always RFI from hijack. So that we know, period. Almost all 10-10 double suited from hijack. Almost 10-10 double suited that RFIs from hijack is called versus 3-bet. And there's some very few exceptions. I'm basically going to ignore the exceptions because there's so few. So if we have double suited 10s and we're in the hijack and we raise, we get to see a flop against a 3-bet. In position, out of position. Like King 6 is supposed to raise fold out of position. And with Ace Jack, Ace 9, or Ace 8, we're supposed to put the 3-bet in out of position. Not going to sweat those details. There's so many other combos. Basically any two cards 6 and higher. That would be a good note. We'll make that note instead. Any two cards 6 and higher get RFI with 10-10 double suited, as do any Ace X and Jack X. So that basically describes the chart in words. If we have pocket 10s and it's double suited to any two cards 6 and higher, any other pair, which would be 9s and lower, because something else we'd call something different, or any ace or any jack, right? So ace deuce, jack deuce, double suited, those hands are all going to be raise and call a 3-bet. And that's a little bit of a sort of, heuristic, like slight simplification, but that's still, that's pretty close. All right, how many do we have left? All right, I don't want to get too deep on some of these pre-flop things. This was the last flop hand, I think, where I flop double blocker, or I flop nothing, right? I have a backdoor flush draw. It's at a 10, and, 3 cards to, like, I can't make a straight. Basically, I have two runner quad draws is basically what I have. All right, so we check. The turn's an ace, and then this player checks a second time. The player behind us has already checked once. There's two things going for this that makes me really want to use it as a bluff. One, this exact combo is double blocking 3-5, which is the absolute nuts, right? The 10s are like kind of irrelevant blockers, I think. I think they don't necessarily help or hurt that much. Sure, they're kind of proximal to the jack and the ace, and therefore maybe they're blocking some of those combos, but I don't think that's significant. But basically, we're double blocking the nuts, which has just become the nuts. And I should have a lot of ace-ace in my range, which might check this flop 3 ways. Right, so I could have ace of hearts, 10 of hearts in my range, in my hand instead of 10 of hearts, 10 of clubs, and be like, yeah, let's bet here. And I might be inclined to bet full pot because there's spades possible, there's Broadway wraps possible, and somebody could make a wheel gutter or something like that. So also here I'm trying to get someone to fold ace X. So because I'm trying to get someone to fold ace X, which I wouldn't super be like trying to get a call with ace ace, because there's only one ace left. I like this bet. I think pot size is the way to go. My opponents haven't expressed any interest in the pot, and so for that reason, I just say, just give me that. Just give me that. And they give me that. All right. This one, just straightforward fold. What was I going to look up about this even? I guess this is just like verify and, confirm, yes, definitely a fold. 5-5 single suited with an ace and a jack. I mean, I could be wrong. We'll see. Loading. Come on. Okay, yes, it's a fold. All right, so ace jack 5-5. Bad suit is fold from hijack. Period. Ace jack 5-5. Good suit is RFI call from hijack. Basically, 5-5 single suited needs smaller pair or suited ace or ace king to RFI in this spot. Hijack. More specific. Okay. That's it. That's that hand. Moving on. King 7-4. Okay, here's maybe a controversial one. Let's see. This is cutoff. So cutoff rainbow kings. So if I look at single suited kings, almost all of the single suited kings are a raise. And then if I look at Broadway at these, this is a raise. This is the bottom of the raising range. So this was too tight. So King 7-4 rainbow is RFI from cutoff, bottom of range. Fold, all bad, 3x and 2x. RFI, everything else except that one, trips. We'll put an X there so it just doesn't look quite as horrible. Okay, moving on. So this, let's go to the button and just remember, let's see, single suited kings, but rainbow. Yeah, almost all of them raise there too. I mean, yeah, basically all of them. So I'm not going to note that, but I'm going to kind of just remember, like, yeah, any king. I'll note it. I hear the voice in my head is saying you should make a note. Is RFI from button. All king is RFI from button, except we'll say trips this time with 4, 3, or 2. We'll say except trips. That just looks too ugly. All right, moving on. Double suited queens. There's a couple limpers. How do we play double suited queens from the hijack, right? I'm the button, but there's 2 limpers. So for 1 limper, I'd go to the cutoff range. 2 limpers, I go to the hijack range. So we'll go there. Double suited queens. And, you know, there's a decent card. This is actually a fold from the hijack, just barely, right? Queen, 9-4, double suited is barely a fold from hijack, along with 8-4 minus, 7-4 minus, and 6-2 minus. That should make sense, right? So like 8-4, 8-3, 8-2, 7-4, 7-3, 7-2, 6-2, 5-2, 4-3, 3-2, right? So those are all folds. From cutoff, let's go look at cutoff and double suited queens. All right, so queen 9-4 suited, double suited is clear raise from cutoff. Only fold 8-3 minus 7-3 minus and 6-2 specifically, not even 5-2 from cutoff. So what this means is this is close, right? In the hijack, I would fold it. In the cutoff, I would raise it. I think folding after 100 VPIP has limped, and then with another very high VPIP in the big blind would actually be a mistake from a real world perspective. So I think raising somewhere between my cutoff and hijack range makes sense. And in fact, I think overlimping any double suited queens might be reasonable here. So I don't mind my play. I think it is, by the pure guidelines of the matrix, it would say probably fold it against 2 limpers, but these aren't 2 neutral limpers. One person actually has very tight range, and the other person has very loose range from the data available. All right, post flop here. I don't think there's that much to say. Like, yeah, I could put a bet out there. I think my opponents, one of them's pretty tight, so they might just fold a lot. But like maybe they limp aces. I don't know. When they both check to me, I think betting wouldn't be ridiculous, as I'm blocking a lot of the flush draws. That's a lot of what can continue. I'm blocking like queen jack hands that are, people often play a jack with queens, but against a very loose player, I don't think that's the sort of player that you want to try to bluff too often. The 4 is a brick. It doesn't really help me in any meaningful way. My opponent bets half pot, and there's a call. So given that, I think it's trivial. Just throw the hand away. And, I don't want to draw to a flush with a pair on board with 2 opponents who are interested, one of whom's fairly tight. And we see that player, actually, I was crushing them. They had 4, and they were drawing completely dead on the turn against me. And the other player actually called with just an ace. So that was kind of on the lighter side of what I would expect. They ended up with aces and jacks with a 10. And they did have a gut shot on the turn as well. So they probably had some sort of a read on this opponent, and that's why they went ahead and called this. And they had to imagine that if I had a hand like ace king, ace queen, I might fold it after they after they called instead of overcalling myself. So, their play is fine, I guess. I don't really understand this as a limp here. I don't think I'd raise it either. Let's see. That would be like under the gun range. I think this is just a fold. Ace 10, 3, 2, I think is just a little too weak. Yeah, so a lot too weak. So with the 3 and the 2, I think they should have just folded pre. So it's interesting to see someone with such tight stats, but then we see them in a hand, and it's like, no, that they probably should have folded that hand. I wonder whether there's other hands that like they probably should have called that they folded. Okay, here I'm going to look up this on the cutoff range, as I think the button is almost definitely a hand I'm going to play. So king, queen, 9, 7 is fold from cutoff, and then I'll look it up on the button. I think it'll probably be a raise from the button. So king, queen, 9, 7. Yeah, so this hand, king, queen, 9, 7, good suit or bad suit, we'll just say single suited, is RFI from button and fold from cutoff, GS or BS. So, it's a fairly clear RFI from button. King, queen, let's see, 9, 5. Also button RFI, right? So the fact that this isn't that close from the button makes me feel like, yeah, I could play it against a loose limper, right? It's not in the cutoff range. It's clearly not in the cutoff range, but it is in the button range. So that's a hand that I can think about, like maybe I do want to raise this. I was saying that I don't think it plays that well multi-way. I think it's kind of an in-between hand where king high flush, reasonable chance of being good against two very loose opponents, which is kind of the most likely outcome if I raise pre. And a lot of these straights are going to be the nuts, and they're going to have redraws to higher straights. Some of them won't be. I'm trying to think about non-nut straights that I can make, though. I think I was wrong, right? There's a jack and a 10. Then if a king or a queen come, those will be non-nut straights. But I can make a nut high 9 straight, 9 high straight, 10 high straight. I can't even make a jack high straight. That would be a queen high straight instead, a king high straight, and an ace high straight. So there's 5 nut straights I can make, plus, the second nut flush, or if an ace of hearts comes to nut flush. I think that maybe I should have raised this. But I don't hate the fold, but I think it's maybe an opportunity. Okay, I'm going to wrap it up there. The session review went a little longer than I had intended, but it's in the ballpark. So for those who have stuck with me, thank you so much. For the new follows, also thank you a lot. And I'll be back tomorrow, same time, same channel. Cheers.